Hey everyone, and welcome back. Before we actually jump into the fun stuff of creating our own user flows, I want to just talk about something that's really important here. When you are creating a bunch of user flows, you really want to be efficient and you want to speed up your workflow as much as possible. You don't want to be spending time on trying to get like a perfect box or making sure your user flows are like high fidelity, because they really don't need to be. They can be really simple. Now, in this page over here called Assets, I have a bunch of different types of assets. And what these are, they kind of look like wireframe assets, to be honest. Now, the best thing we can actually do here is we need to think about all the different types of assets that we could possibly use, and we can keep it really simple. So what I've done is I've created a one column bunch of assets. So like just an image or image and, like text, and, there's like some subheading and a heading and all that kind of stuff. I also have a grid here as well, all using auto layout. It's really simple stuff. And I'll show you how to create a couple of these different things, but I've created like even 3-column products based off of our client and what we want to build. And I've also created just plain text pieces over here. Then we have some like inputs and buttons. If you have like forms that you want to use, I have like a primary and a secondary button. And that's all I basically have here. And I think you should do your best to also create something similar to this, so that way you have something always to reference and to use. So let's get into creating some of these little pieces. So you can do it any which way you want. I like to keep my things really neat, so I'm just going to make a copy over here. You have this file, so I encourage you all to follow along to take a look and see if you could recreate some of these pieces. I think maybe we can start with something like this. So basically, if we wanted to recreate this, what I've done is I have a frame here, which is like the device frame. And you can choose any size, or you can just go ahead and choose like the 13 Pro. I believe that's the size I'm using. What I've done here is I've just rounded the corners to just give it a nice little effect and put a nice faint stroke just on the outside. So I'm just going to add a stroke and add a color, and we're going to move rather quickly through this. And I am going to make that stroke dark so we can all see it, and it was set to the outside. Now you can create anything you like. You can create something that looks like mine. It doesn't have to. I'm just creating something really rough here, so just to walk you through that process. Now the other interesting thing here is I'm going to make this an auto layout frame, because I just want my content to like stack nicely. I don't want to have to worry about like laying out, to be honest. Like that's not my priority here. I just need it to be neater, and I can focus more so on writing the details. So what I do is I just created an auto layout frame. You can set the padding to whatever you like. I think 16 or something like 24 is probably the best. And then you can set the spacing. I like keeping everything to 16 is totally fine. Now for these little squares, what I did was I just created a square, and I used the rectangle tool. So you can go up here and get it, or you can just press R. So I'm going to use R, and it doesn't really matter for the size just yet. And I'm going to duplicate that by using the shortcut, which is Command D or Control D. And it's over here. We'll make this a little bit darker so that way we can see. So now we have two like blocks, and we can use things like this as like imagery, and we can group that into a frame, and we can just call this like images or whatever you want. Then you can set the spacing in auto layout, and we can just throw this frame right in. Whoops. So you can resize your device if you want. So that is basically how you can just make like images. And the same thing basically goes for these little like text layers. All I've done is I've made these little rectangles, and put them in a auto layout frame, as you can see. So if you're confused as to like, oh, well, how did you make something like that? Just always look at the actual layers in here and break them down. This is an auto layout frame. You don't actually need this one, so I could actually remove it and it still functions the same. You can just adjust the width here instead of setting it to like fill the container like this. And you can also set like some paragraph text if you want to have like the effect of having long text. So there's a bunch of things you can do like that. For buttons, I essentially just created like the same thing. I have another rectangle. I just gave it like a fixed height of something. And, you have like a black version for like a primary, and then, you create another duplicate of that, and we'll have a secondary. So maybe like if you have like a cancel and save button or something like that. So you can go ahead and create different types of assets like that. And I really do encourage you to do your best to, name those assets. Right now, I'm not being the best over here. I just call it rectangle. But if you look at the assets that you have available to you, I have like primary button laid out. And I think this is the first step into understanding how you could be way more efficient with your workflow. Now, that is all you're really going to need to know to get started here. And I wouldn't worry too much about like creating components just yet or anything like that. I would use some of these assets and just start throwing them inside these devices. You'll notice that they are fixed width and a fixed height. So you can set these to fill the container and not really worried about, how the container reacts. And yeah, that's basically it. These are going to be some useful assets for you.